Being with us this morning, and it is really my honor and pleasure to have an old and dear friend with me, Bill McKibben. I think many of you know Bill is a prolific writer. His books have been translated into dozens of languages around the world. But what Bill has also done is not just write, he has organized at the grassroots level. He is the founder of 350.org. And he understands that on issues like climate change, it's not a Vermont issue, it's not an American issue, it is a global issue. He has helped organize all over the world. Bill, thanks so much for being with us.
Bernie, what a pleasure to join you.
Let's cut to the chase. You are here for the People's March on Climate this Saturday. Why is it important that people show up for that?
There's going to be hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, just like there were almost that many in the streets last weekend for the Science March. People are ready to rock and roll on this issue, this set of issues. The most unpopular thing of all the unpopular things that President Trump has done, the most unpopular according to the polls, is the gutting of all environmental protection right at the moment when we should be going exactly in the other direction. The planet's falling apart. We're watching, we've had the 3 hottest years in history in the last 3 years, okay? And we're watching damage in the Arctic and across America, every continent on the planet. And we've got all the technology we could dream of to push forward, and instead we're just stuck in this cul-de-sac with our president our president stumbling around in the dark.
Bill, I think I share with you an optimism, in a sense, in terms of some fantastic breakthroughs that are taking place all over the world. But let's do this. Let's do the bad news and the good news. If this country and the world does not respond to climate change, what kind of planet are we looking forward to for our kids and our grandchildren?
Look, the scientists have told us the most carbon we could safely have in the planet, in the atmosphere, is about 350 parts per million CO2. Yesterday, for the first time in at least 5 million years, the planet went past 410 parts per million. We're way too high already. And just the same way that when a person has a cholesterol level or a blood pressure that's way past where it could be, the planet starts breaking down. Both ice caps are now melting fast. What that means is that the rise in sea levels is accelerating to the point where, Miami Beach on a perfectly sunny day with no storm offshore, the water is coming up through the limestone with the high tide. It's flooding things. There's a story last week saying that coastal real estate, trillions of dollars worth of coastal real estate, is at risk because nobody can get it insured anymore. The storms that we get are larger and more damaging, and that's in the parts of the world that are relatively well off, that can sort of deal with this kind of thing. In the rest of the world, there's people dying in huge quantities already from drought and flood every single day.
And what happens to our oceans if the planet continues to warm?
The last time that we had carbon at this level in the atmosphere, which was 5-10 million years ago, we think the oceans were something like 20 meters, 60 feet higher eventually. Anybody who's ever been to one of the great coastal cities of the world, and that's most of the cities of the world, and stood there looking out at the ocean, understands that, that brings the water way past where anybody could,
So we're looking, if we don't get our act together boldly, at more drought, more flooding.
That's right.
More rising sea levels, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean. That is of huge consequences.
Absolutely. We're an ocean planet, and the fact that we've changed the chemistry of seawater is just crazy. And that we're continuing, at the moment, at the current path we're on, the 1 degree Celsius, about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit that we've raised the planet's temperature, is going to be 3.5 degrees Celsius, maybe 7-8 degrees Fahrenheit before the century is out. There are no scientists who look at this stuff who think that we can have civilizations on the scale we're used to having them if we do that.
What is unbelievable is that we can see the changes in our own lifetimes with our own eyes. And we're not talking about thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, you and I live near Lake Champlain in Vermont. The old timers will tell you that it always used to freeze.
Always
up.
froze stem to stern. Now it's rare that we get a year where it does that.
And people who I always thought were a little bit crazy, but I could remember, drove their cars across the lake from Burlington to Plattsburgh.
Yep, I've skied across it way, 30 years ago.
But that's not the case anymore. All right, that's the bad news, and it is frightening for the future of this planet. But there's a lot of good news.
There sure
Breakthroughs
is.
that are taking place, developments that are taking place. Talk about that.
Let's talk about who's done their job right. Scientists did their job right. They gave us the warning that we needed to get us going, even though we haven't heated it. The engineers did their job. The price of a solar panel has plummeted over the last decade. It's about 80% cheaper to have a solar panel than it was just 10 years ago. It's doing the same thing that cell phones did, a decade ago. Now everybody has a cell phone. Everybody could have a solar panel, except that there's an industry that's standing in the way of that.
I want to get to the role of the fossil fuel industry, but talk about the growth of solar, the plummeting prices, and the fact that we expect more breakthroughs in making panels more efficient, yes?
Absolutely. We're on the steep learning curve now, where with each month that goes by, we get better at this. The more of them we roll out. It's not just that we get better at making the panels. There's a lot of great work going on about getting more efficient about how you put the panels up. They're now contractors. I mean, I gave the talk at the Vermont Green Building Conference this year, and there were 1,000 contractors from around just the little state of Vermont who now a substantial part of their work is up on the roof putting up solar panels. Well, what do you know? They're getting good at it. They can do it in half a day now often, bring a house ready to go. Same with wind, same with all these new technologies. And the thing that's so amazing about them is the thing we don't think about that often, but once you've built them, then the power's
all right, so here is the story, and this is, and I'm not sure that, we have done as good a job as we could in advertising this. All right, you're an average homeowner in an average community. It cost you $15,000 or $20,000 to install solar today. The price will go down tomorrow, but that's where it is today. You're going to you will be having, 80–100% of your electricity produced by the panels. Your fuel bill of $100 or $120, depending on where you live, is going to disappear.
That's right. It's not just solar panels, too. We know how to do great insulation. We've got things like air source heat pumps. Like, you've been to a house, I've been there, I wrote about it for the New Yorker. Rutland, Vermont. Rutland, Vermont is not like the deluxe part of Vermont. It's not community. Ski chalets. Right. It's, it's a real place. In a weekend, contractors moved into people's houses, put in enough insulation, put in new things like air source heat pumps, put in solar panels. They charged it all through the electric bill, put in the electric bill. The electric bill went down because they were saving so much money.
Here is the point. People that paid off that energy conservation and the solar through a reduction in their electric bill.
Exactly right. And their house was finally comfortable.
Right. So the point is, it didn't cost them a nickel more. There's a payback of whatever it may be, 8–10 years. So you don't pay a nickel more for your energy, and then at the end of 10 years you can have free electricity. That's a pretty good deal.
So the obvious question is, why aren't we doing this every house in the country as fast as we can? Especially since doing it would create not thousands of jobs, not tens of thousands of jobs. It would create millions. I mean, the bill that you and Senator Merkley introduced today create 4 million jobs doing this stuff. The reason I think we don't do it is because for the fossil fuel industry, which is the richest industry that the world's ever known, this is the most foolish possible business plan. They hate it. You put a solar panel up on the roof, well, you can make some money even if you're Exxon doing that if you wanted to, but once you've done it, then the sun delivers your power for free. From Exxon's point of view, that's insane.
Essentially, we are moving, this is what Nikola Tesla talked about way back when. We are literally moving in the direction of free electricity. Okay, and the opposition to this is coming from the fossil fuel industry. I wanted to mention to you, I was recently in Florida, I was in Arizona, and I was in Nevada. And you know what? These are states blessed with enormous solar exposure. I didn't see a whole lot of solar.
Let's talk about Phoenix, okay?
Let's talk about
Phoenix is, they call it the Valley of the Sun, where they live. You know what the name of the Phoenix basketball team is?
I do.
What do you know? It's the Phoenix Suns, the Arizona State University Sun Devils, okay? There's nothing there but sun, day after day after day. The utilities, using all kinds of dark money, were able to capture the Public Utility Commission, which in turn, in large parts of the state, made it so expensive to put a solar panel on the roof that nobody could do it. They charged these connection fees that would go on forever into the future. I mean, it's almost, one of the problems here is that it's hard to get people to believe that companies would stand in the way. But we know now from great investigative reporting by the LA Times, Columbia Journalism School, we know that 35 years ago, companies like Exxon knew everything there was to know about climate change. They had the best scientists in the world. Their only product was carbon. Of course they were studying it, and they were coming to the right conclusions. They knew how fast and how much the planet would warm. In fact, they knew so well that they started doing things like designing their own drilling rigs to accommodate the sea level rise they knew was coming. But did they tell any of us? No. They spent a lot of money building that architecture of deceit. They just hired, they got a lot of guys that came straight from the whole tobacco industry stuff. Same deal. Let's see if we can string this out for 25 or 50 years, keep our business model going, even if it breaks the planet in the process.
And the results were the same. You had the tobacco industry lying about the health impacts of tobacco. The result is that so many people, including my own father, died because they were smoking. And now you're having these guys, the fossil fuel industry, trying to obfuscate the science.
The only difference is that the tobacco industry took us down one person at a time. The fossil fuel industry is doing it one planet at a time.
You have been not only a writer, but you have been an extraordinarily effective grassroots organizer. Talk a little bit about what's going around the globe. We're having the People's Climate March this Saturday here. But there is a global movement because you have pointed out time and time again, it is the poorest people in the world, poorest people in America who are going to be hit most because of climate change.
No, there's a perfect inverse relationship. How much of the problem did you cause? The less you caused, the worse you get it. All over the world now, people are rising up. And it's interesting, there's governments like ours under Mr. Trump that are trying to block action. Mr. Putin's probably the other great example, another sort of oily
and by
oligarch.
the way, that is not that's not an accident that you have people like Putin and Trump working together to protect the fossil fuel.
No, these are, the U.S. and Russia and Saudi Arabia are the three biggest producers of hydrocarbons on the planet. But there are other countries that now, almost surprisingly, are stepping into the breach and showing what can be done. The Chinese, who took a 15-year detour into building a huge number of coal-fired power plants, in part because they were encouraged by others in the world, the oil industry chief among them, into doing that, their cities are now so choked with smog that they have no choice. They're also desperately worried about climate change. And so they're leading the world all of a sudden in putting in renewable energy. Chinese coal use is going down, but the way in which they're building solar and wind dwarfs anything that's ever gone on this earth.
But even conservative states like Texas doing phenomenal in terms of wind, yes?
A lot of wind in Texas, absolutely. No, it's hard to beat the economics of free. The fossil fuel industry is doing their best, and they've got so much. Part of the political process better than I do, but it strikes me always that the way that money in politics works